They didn't know who they laid hands on. They didn't know the blood in her veins carried the fire of the Montgomery marches. They didn't know the son she raised in silence had eyes trained to see through war, and hands built to end it. All they saw was an old black woman, and so they beat her, right there, on her own porch. Loretta Mae Johnson had lived 72 long, proud years. Her hands had held history rocking her children, while the TV blared news of Dr. King's assassination, wiping her husband's brow as he lay dying from the factory poisons no white man ever warned him about. Her heart had endured, her back had bent, but on that summer evening, it was her dignity they tried to break. The officers said it was a misunderstanding, said they thought she was someone else, but 5 knees on her spine don't sound like confusion. Broken ribs don't echo apologies. Loretta's screams didn't reach her neighbors. They were drowned out by the hot sound of sirens and the cold clink of steel, but they reached someone far away, someone trained to hear the tone of his mother's cry, even through silence. And when she made that one phone call, blood in her mouth, shaking hands, the phone pressed against a cheek that would later bruise purple, she didn't dial 911. She called her son. She called war. You ever hear the quiet before a storm hits? That's what followed next. Because the son of Loretta Mae Johnson wasn't just anybody. He was Delta Force, the kind of man who didn't post threats. He executed justice, quietly, precisely. And when he arrived, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You're going to hear what happened next. But let me warn youth, this isn't just a story about police brutality. It's a story about legacy, about the cost of silence, about what happens when the wrong people think the right people are too old, too tired, or too black to matter anymore. And if you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, if you believe black dignity is not disposable, if your heart's already pounding from this injustice, tap that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so these stories never die in silence. Because the world needs to remember. Every elder has a story, every scar has a witness, and every son raised in pain can return in power. Now, let me tell you what really happened on that porch. They say time moves slower when you're in pain. For Loretta, each second after the assault stretched out like Tarthic, heavy, unrelenting. The flashing red and blue lights flickered across her front lawn, casting shadows that twisted across the same porch where she once braided her daughter's hair. Her straw hat had rolled into the street, crushed beneath a patrol boot. The peaches had spilled soft golden fruit, now stained red from where her lip had split open. Officer Langston, the one with the shaved head and mirrored sunglasses, barked into his radio like a man trying to control a fire he started himself. The younger one, Murphy, his nameplate read, kept pacing like he knew something had gone wrong. Deep down, they both felt it. This wasn't just an arrest gone wrong. This was something else. Something their badge couldn't cover. Loretta lay on the ground. Every bone ached. Her left eye was already swelling shut. But she didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't scream. She just reached for her personally, carefully. Murphy's hand went to his holster in a panic. "Don't move," he shouted. She paused, looked up at him not with fear, but with something colder, something ancient, something that made the young officer take a step back without knowing why. "I'm just getting my phone," she said, her voice hoarse but deliberate, and then she dialed 3 numbers, not 911, not a neighbor, her son, across the globe, in a classified zone where borders blurred and loyalties were paid for in blood. Master Sergeant Elijah Johnson felt his satellite phone vibrate. He was deep in the field, dust in his teeth, rifle across his chest, mind sharp as glass. But when he saw the name flash on that encrypted screen, Mama, calling the world, stopped moving. No words, just breathing. And then a trembling voice. "They put their hands on me, baby." Elijah didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He didn't even curse. He just said, "I'm on my way." The next day, the town woke up the way it always had. Coffee brewed in old tin pots. Church bells rang at 9 a.m. sharp. The same squad car parked outside the diner like it did every morning. Nobody spoke about what happened the night before. People saw the bruises on Loretta's face through the window and lowered their eyes. They were used to lowering their eyes. But that day, something felt different. The air was heavier, like a thunderstorm that hadn't cracked open yet. At exactly 9:37 a.m., a black SUV with military plates pulled up to Loretta's home. The engine cut, doors opened, and out stepped Elijah. He wasn't wearing fatigues. No armor, no patches, just boots, jeans, and a stare that could break concrete. He walked up those porch steps slowly, like he'd walked them 100 times in his dreams. He didn't speak at first, just knelt beside his mother, kissed her forehead gently, and took her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly inside his, then stilled. For the first time since it happened, Loretta let a tear fall. "Baby, I didn't want to call you. I didn't want to bring this into your life." "You didn't," Elijah replied. "They did." And just like that, everything shifted. What had been a local incident, buried under paperwork and procedural excuses, had just become something else. Something no badge, no press release, no internal affairs memo could wash away. Because Elijah wasn't here for revenge. He was here for the truth. And when truth comes wrapped in discipline, training, and righteous fury, it doesn't knock, it enters. Elijah didn't walk into the police department looking for a fight. He walked in looking like one. The room fell silent the second the door closed behind him. Every officer turned to look. Some recognized him, most didn't, but all of them felt the pressure shift as if the air had thickened, and they were breathing through consequence. "Can I help you?" the desk sergeant asked, half curious, half defensive. "I'm looking for Officer Langston and Officer Murphy," Elijah said, his voice calm, polite, too polite. The sergeant hesitated. "They're out on you. Can tell them I'm the son of Loretta Mae Johnson, the woman they assaulted on her own property." He paused. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to file federal charges." And with that, he laid down the badge. Not a police badge, a military one, high-level clearance, Delta designation. His ID slipped beside it like punctuation. And then a USB drive, which he slid across the counter. "Body cam footage," Elijah said before the sergeant could speak. "From Murphy's vest. You've already tried deleting it from your system. But satellites don't lie." Silence, thick, unmoving. In the span of seconds, everything they thought they had buried was unearthing itself. Elijah had come prepared. He'd traced the internal case file, found the edited report, retrieved the footage from a military-grade satellite, recording the area originally meant for overseas surveillance. Now redirected, with one call to an old friend who owed him everything. And that footage didn't lie. It showed his mother, cane in hand, asking why 2 officers were on her porch without a warrant. It showed her raising her voice but never her hand. It showed them grabbing her, slamming her. It showed the moment her hat flew. Her head struck the wooden steps. The moment they stopped seeing her as human and started seeing her as something to control. And now, it showed them the reckoning. The department's chief arrived within the hour. There was no press yet, no sirens, just quiet chaos behind the glass walls of bureaucracy as Elijah sat, arms folded, a storm barely contained. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. He spoke with facts, with precision, with discipline born of war and justice learned through pain. "I want both officers suspended immediately," he said, "without pay." "That's not how it works," Elijah leaned forward. "Then fix how it works." There was a stillness that followed, the kind of silence that swells before institutions crack. He continued, "I want public acknowledgement of what happened. I want a formal apology delivered to my mother in person. I want retraining across this entire precinct. And I want it on record that Loretta Mae Johnson was a target of excessive force motivated by racial profiling. And if we don't," the chief asked, as if trying to feel out the limits of this man's power. Elijah smiled, cold, measured. "Then I go national. I take the footage to every outlet in the country. I testify in front of Congress. I organize every elder in this town to walk straight into your station holding pictures of their bruises. And I don't stop until the world knows your names." The chief blinked, once. Then he reached for the phone. Down the hall, Langston sat in an interrogation room now flipped against him. Murphy was next. The system that once protected them was cracking at the seams, piece by piece. And the irony was sharp. 2 officers who had assumed they were dealing with a powerless woman now faced the unflinching resolve of a son shaped by battle, born of a woman who knew how to endure. That night, back at the house, Loretta sat quietly in her armchair, a soft blanket pulled across her knees. Elijah stood in the doorway, watching her in the way only a son does after almost losing his whole world. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I always come," he replied. She nodded, then looked at him. "Don't forget who you are," she said. "But more importantly, make sure they don't." He didn't reply, just took a deep breath. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. The storm had come and gone, but its memory lingered. The days that followed weren't quiet, but they were different. A press release came first, awkward, carefully worded, full of legal terms and vague remorse. But it was something. Then came the suspension, Langston indefinitely, Murphy pending investigation. Behind closed doors, city officials scrambled. The mayor offered to meet Loretta privately. She declined. If they want to see me, she told Elijah, they can come to church on Sunday like everyone else. And so they did. That Sunday morning, Ebenezer Baptist was full to the brim, overflowing pews, folding chairs in the back, fans waving gently in the humid air. And there she sat, Loretta Mae Johnson, dressed in soft lavender, pearls around her neck, a purple bruise still fading beneath her right eye. The mayor came, so did the chief of police. They stood up when the pastor called her name. They walked the aisle in silence, stopping just before the pulpit. The mayor cleared his throat, then offered words that had never been spoken in that church's 100-year history. Mrs. Johnson, on behalf of this city, we failed you, and we are sorry. There were no cheers, no applause, just silence, heavy, sacred silence, the kind that wraps itself around a moment and marks it as holy. Loretta looked at them for a long time, then nodded. Once. But what followed wasn't about the mayor, or the chief, or even Elijah. It was about the people. Because after the apology, neighbor after neighbor stood up. One by one, stories spilled like water, bruises never explained, stops that escalated without cause, voices that went unheard. Loretta had cracked something open, and now the flood came, with dignity, with pain, with power. Elijah sat in the back, hands folded, watching it unfold. He wasn't needed up front, not anymore. His mother had already done the real work. Later that week, Loretta received a letter in the mail. Not from the city, not from the police, from a young black girl 12 years old, across town, who had seen her story on the news. It said, "Dear Mrs. Johnson, I didn't know someone like me could be strong. Now I do." Loretta kept that letter on her nightstand, framed it, read it every morning before her coffee. And Elijah, he returned to duty eventually, but something had changed. His comrades noticed it. A sharper edge, a quieter strength. When asked what happened, he never gave details. He'd simply say, "My mother reminded me who I was fighting for." Because in the end, this wasn't a story about violence. It wasn't even a story about justice. It was a story about dignity, about how the world will always underestimate the power of an old black woman, until the day she stands up, bloodied but unbowed, and teaches everyone around her what strength really looks like. So if you've made it this far, if you felt something in your chest that told you this wasn't just fiction, that this was truth to many people live with in silence, then like this video, comment your thoughts, share this story with someone who still believes respect is earned through fear, and subscribes, so these stories are never forgotten, never rewritten, never silenced again. Because somewhere, right now, another Loretta is reaching for her phone. Let's make sure when she calls, the world is finally ready to listen.